in the midst of weakness and not despite our weakness. Glory to God.
And that was Father Stephen Freeman with Glory to God. Father Stephen is the priest at St. Anne Orthodox Church in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and hosts the Glory to God for All Things blog site, which can be accessed from his podcast site at ancientfaithradio.com. This is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.
Proclaiming Christ, victor over sin and death. You're listening to Ancient Faith Radio, your Orthodox Internet radio connection.
This is Everyday Orthodox with your host, Elisa Bielatich Davis. We get together on Sunday nights to meet everyday Orthodox Christians. We're hoping to get to know the members of the body of Christ across all of our various jurisdictions and regions. We may worship in various languages or even on different calendars, but we have so much in common. Come get to know someone new and see how they're living out this Orthodox faith in another corner of the world. After all, every person is an icon of Christ, and as we'll see, every person has a story to tell. If you have a question for tonight's guest, we invite you to call in and join the conversation at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-AF-RADIO. Now, here's Elisa.
Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. It is August 14th, 2022, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. I'm Elisa Bielatich Davis, and I welcome you to the show again tonight. For those of you who don't tune in every week, if this is your first time around, Everyday Orthodox is just a time to get together and get to know another Everyday Orthodox Christian. And so every week we bring someone on the show and we just sit and talk. We just say, who are you and where are you from and what's your life like? And we just get to know each other. We Orthodox we're sort of scattered all over the place, right? Like even here in the United States, it's a big country and we have people all over the country that you probably haven't met. And we tend to divide ourselves up a little bit. We worship in different jurisdictions, sometimes even in different languages. And I think it's just a wonderful thing to have the opportunity to get to know one another across all of those dividing lines. So I thank you for joining us here tonight. And I hope you'll join us every Sunday night. And we'll just keep getting to know different, fascinating, everyday Orthodox people. And you are welcome to call in. You can call in at 1-855-AF-RADIO, and you can ask any questions you like of our guest. Our Matushka Trudy Richter is right here producing the program again tonight, and she'll take your calls. So give us a call at 1-855-AF-RADIO, and you can ask any questions you like. But without any further ado, let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Her name is Voula Asimacopoulos. And Voula is wonderful because she actually emails me sometimes after a show and she'll say, I really liked your guest. And just recently, for those of you who remember, we had Elise Fotini on the phone. And Elise is a co-author with me actually of a book about Orthodox single mother saints in our lives from Park End Books. And it's a lovely book, especially because it reaches out to single mothers and divorced mothers, widowed mothers in the Orthodox Church. And too often, we don't really address moms who don't have a husband in the house. And so I think it's a beautiful thing to do. But so Voula had written in and said, thank you for having a single mom on the show. I love hearing that because Voula's a single mom too. And we got to talking and I said, well, maybe you need to come on the show and tell us your story. And so here she is. So Voula is a primary care physician in the Chicagoland area. She's a Greek Orthodox woman and she's a mom and she's here to tell us all about herself. So Voula, we are so excited to get to know you. Voula, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on the show, Elise. And I'm also an AFR stalker because I love so many of you people. Even during, my divorce and afterwards and everything, you cannot imagine how much listening to the different podcasts helped me cope and go through this. So thank you. And I'm so glad you mentioned the book, The Grace of Being There, because I cried with every chapter. And I have to give every single author, even the editor, not even, but I mean, kudos beyond kudos, because I felt like finally there's a voice out there for us. So thank you.
Oh, thank God. Vula, that's a lovely thing to say. And it was Park End Books, Summer Kinnard over there. She had the idea for this book. She contacted each of us and she didn't leave anything to chance either. She was like, Elisa, you have to write about Saint Helena. And I was like, yes, ma'am. And it did. It came out so beautifully and it's so wonderful. And, I'll tell you what else. I also spent so many years listening to Ancient Faith before I got to meet everybody and be a part of things. And it's just a wonderful ministry. It's so nice to have that company and to have all these neat priests on here teaching us all sorts of things. And I just love it. So, Vula, thank you for being a part of it and coming on. And thank you for, your emails over time and stuff. So tell me, okay, how does your story begin? Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Toronto, Canada, which is the next biggest importer of Greeks to the United States after Greece. So there's a lot of us in the Chicago area. We always say, yeah, we're imported, but not from Greece. So I came to this country when it was, I know.
That's hilarious.
It is, every so often you meet a Greek, go, wait, you were born in Canada too? Where? Montreal or Toronto? Oh, you're one of them, So it's kind of comical. It's kind of comical. But I was 5 years old when I immigrated in the late 60s. My dad came here because he had better job opportunities. And, that was, how we got here. I don't know, keep telling you my story. I'm nervous. If you can tell, I'm nervous. But
I cannot tell.
Yeah.
I cannot tell in a little bit, and don't worry about it. But just out of curiosity, did your parents, were they born in Canada and had they imagined that they would just always stay in Canada and then kind of surprised they moved? Or did they work their way from Greece to the U.S. via Canada? How did it work for them?
Yeah, from Greece. It's such a funny story. So my mom and dad were born right around, late 20s, early 30s in Greece, and they only knew war and poverty during their childhood. We were from part of near ancient Olympia in the Peloponnese, and it's a fertile area, but the way things were, every time you had a child get married, you had to give a dowry. The properties were shrinking. They had known only, poverty for so many years, and neither of them had felt that there was any future left for them. So it's kind of funny because my mom is actually the one who immigrated to Canada. She had been orphaned at the age of 8. Her father raised her and her sisters and her brother, and she just wanted a better life. The schools were closed. She had wanted to become a teacher but never had that opportunity. Even my Aunt Georgia, who was brilliant and had actually won a kind of like a scholarship to go to high school, had to be taken out of high school so that she could raise her younger, sisters. So, just things didn't look very good. And my mom kept insisting that she was going to go to Canada, and, she wanted to go to the United States, but Canada was an easier place to immigrate to. So she came to Canada and got a job working at Canada Dry, and which is kind of funny. It's the only ginger ale we'll have in our house. So
it is actually the only ginger ale I will have in my house because it's the best one. It tastes so good. It's very good.
It has real ginger. That's why, So
that's what it is.
So after like a year or so, my grandfather was like, "This is crazy. I have a single daughter living in a country. She didn't know the language. She needs to get married." So he kind of pre-selected like 6 young men for her.
No.
And no kidding. This is how arranged marriages go. But at least she had a voice to it, and she said to her father, like, "Listen, I think I need somebody who's actually a craftsman or a tradesman. I don't think we're going to make it, just being another factory worker over there, because I'm working in a factory and it ain't easy." So my dad, who she vaguely knew and was a couple years younger than her, it was actually a carpenter as well as, farmer. So they kind of liked each other and got married and immigrated to Canada. So. And then,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that is great. That is fantastic. And I know families even here where that's happened, where I have a friend who hadn't gotten married yet and she just didn't really want to actually, but her grandfather thought it was about time and she came over and he had like a dinner. He invited her to dinner and there were 5 or 6 guys lined up at the table and it was like, pick one. It was great. But I mean, I
Oh.
guess a lot of people would love that, it's kind of great.
Oh, it is. It is. And, it was a long lasting marriage. So, it worked. It worked.
It's
They loved each
wonderful.
other. My dad
Oh,
missed
I
her. My
love that.
mom passed away. And, it was a good marriage. It was not always the smoothest marriage, I'll tell you, but definitely a good, strong marriage. So, yeah.
May
So,
her memory be eternal. That's
yeah, amen.
beautiful.
Thank you.
I love
Thank you.
that. I love that. So did they
Thank you.
have a lot of kids or just you, or how did that work out?
No, I have a younger sister, Olympia, who is my, let me tell you, my rock. We're sisters. We have different temperaments, and I'm not going to say everything is kumbaya between us all the time, but, I have no doubt we die for each other. And, she's been there for me for my difficulties and my joys. And sometimes you're kind of a little bit vinegar to each other, but in the end, you go home and you're like, you know what, this person really loves me. I will never doubt it. And they will always be there for me. So, that's my sister. So
That's beautiful. What a blessing.
yeah.
What a blessing to have a person like that in your life. I love that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So you're growing up, you came over from Toronto at about 5
Yeah.
and you were in Chicago. Were you like really in Chicago or were you in the suburbs or where were you?
Oh, really in Chicago. So our first neighborhood was Assumption, which was on the borders of another suburb, but it was a very heavily Greek neighborhood. It's funny because my dad actually came over from Canada to the United States first, and this is where he decided to live. And I actually attended half a year of Greek kindergarten at the church over there at Assumption, Plato School. And after that, we moved to kind of the outskirts of another Greek neighborhood on the far north side, St. Demetrius Church, which in the 70s, they said it actually had more Greeks living around it than even Astoria, New York. It was very heavily concentrated with Greeks. You'd walk down the street on any given day, and every other house, somebody sitting on the stoop was speaking Greek. We had Greek grocery stores. The church, of course, was the center of everything. It was a different life. I miss those days sometimes, Greek restaurants, Greek, you went to this bakery, you got your birthday cake from that place. It was all Greek, 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 but it was kind of fun. And then,
I love that.
the neighborhood kind of changed in Chicago every so often. So my parents decided to, again, stay in Chicago, but move to the far northwest side. And that was a culture shock to me because when we were living outside of St. Demetrius, we was a much more international neighborhood. There was a Jewish population. There were, kids that, all kinds, Hispanic. I mean, you name it, everything was there. And this neighborhood was a heavily white Catholic neighborhood, so which didn't have a lot of funny names like Asimacopoulos floating around. So, adjusting to, sixth grade and everybody knew each other. And I'm the girl that's not got only a funny last name, she's got a funny first name, was a little bit of a challenge. But, I did make friends. I did do well in school. Again, you look at school quality in neighborhoods and such. So when it was time for me to go to high school, I told my parents, you know what, I went on a tour of the public high school over there. And if you make me go there, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump off a bridge. I am not going there. And they allowed me to go to a girls' Catholic high school, which really, in a lot of ways, was, challenged my faith. But in a way, helped my assertiveness. I don't want to take over the whole interview, so you can interrupt me, Lisa, anytime you want.
No, this is all fascinating. And the only thing I just have to say is I am so delighted by the way that you just identified neighborhoods in Chicago by the church.
Yeah,
like you were saying,
yeah,
you said we lived in Assumption and then we lived outside of St. Demetrios. And like,
yeah.
what a beautiful way, like, what a neat thing to be in a place where there are so many Greek Orthodox churches that really is how it worked, right? You were kind of like in the region of this and the region of that. But what that also says is that the life of the church really meant something in your youth. And I don't know, would you say that it's really the parish, like Assumption or St. Demetrios, that meant a lot? Or was it more just like that community? You just thought of it as Assumption and you thought of the community as St. Demetrios?
No, it was the church. I mean, to this day, when I meet Greeks, like there's two first questions you ask them, even when they come in as my patients, because some seek a Greek-speaking doctor, and it's kind of like, what part of Greece are you from? What church do you go to? It's always like trying to figure out, okay, are you like at my church? Are you? And I just don't recognize you. Are you, because we're wearing masks? Are you? From St. John's? Are you from? It's just like you kind of ask everybody. So it's a very important question. Yes.
I
So
love that. That's so
yeah.
cool. That's so neat. Well, and I do want to say, I don't know if anybody can hear this on your end, but there might be some weird noises in the background, and it's like birds going crazy
Oh,
because
you're
I
kidding.
actually happen to be
Oh,
doing this interview today from outdoors
oh,
because
I
I'm in
can't
a
hear it.
house full of family and everyone's so loud and so
Oh,
crazy. But that's a beautiful thing, But it was like, I was like, you know what? I think I better just stay on the porch so that I'm not yelling at you guys to be quiet. So just so anybody knows, if you hear like a bunch of birds, they're birds. I'm sorry. They're just crazy tonight. But anyway,
Elisa,
that's my
my whole
warning.
family, we love birds. So we love the sound of
Perfect.
birds. So this is fine. So
This is
yeah,
working out great.
yeah.
I'll tell you, this is
So.
fantastic. Well, good. So, okay. So you ended up at the Catholic high school and you were saying that was kind of a challenge to your faith. It seems like you were really just constantly in an Orthodox community until that time. Is that right? Were you just always with Orthodox people?
Yeah. Well, that was most of the people. Like, my parents are very protective of me, or us, and so they didn't really let us hang out too much with our non-Greek friends because, they really didn't know what kind of people they were. So, most of it sounds terrible, but most of your social activities were like your extended family, or somebody who
Yeah.
comes from the same part of Greece or kind of knew you. Um, so
Wow.
yeah, it was a challenge, and this was like a very American block we moved to. I mean, we were in apartments, then we lived in a house. This building, I mean, everybody was Catholic on the block. Everybody belonged to either St. Robert's Parish or St. Pascal's Parish. They did block parties. It was a very Catholic neighborhood. I'll tell you that. But we had wonderful neighbors, and even though my parents had heavy Greek accents, I'll never forget the kindness of, the Dillon family, for example, 2 houses over, and many others. So God bless them. So they were wonderful, wonderful.
That's
My
great.
mom broke her arm once, and my sister and I had tickets to go to Florida to a convention, and we were like, okay, we're canceling. And Mrs. Dillon comes over and she goes, "You will not. I will be there for your mother." And here was this lady with an Irish accent, and my mom was a Greek, and she came over for the couple of days, and it was very endearing. But going in that kind of atmosphere and seeing people that were as devout in their faith as we were in the Orthodoxy really shook me up because I felt like, okay, we have the true faith, but they think they have the true faith. This is
Yeah.
impossible. I was just and I got very angry at God. So I became agnostic, like my 13th to 14th year. I still continue to pray, which is something my parents always did. I never saw them leave the house without making the sign of the cross. My mom would always stand in front of her iconostasion like half an hour every morning, half an hour every night, just whispering and doing her cross and praying to God. My dad, always, praying before eating. So prayer was always a big thing for my sister and I. And I would actually kneel down and say to God during my agnostic year, okay, if you're really there, and then I'd go on and say my prayer. And then I wouldn't feel happy.
Yeah.
I used to feel happy, Elisa, and I wasn't feeling happy. And I was just still so mad at him. Like, how could you let this happen, that all these people think they have the true faith? And what does this mean? And it's kind of weird, but one day I just got tired of being unhappy. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to believe again. That was it. And it was like, I made my peace with why there's different religions or different versions,
Yeah.
and I just believed. So
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing, right? Because I mean, it is true. Orthodoxy and Catholicism are different, but it is the same God. And it is,
right.
so it's like, well, ultimately what you're really seeing is there are different ways perhaps to approach God, but it's like, but it is hard because I think especially with our kids, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like sometimes, especially in an ethnic group, you have this feeling like, okay, we Greeks worship this way and Americans do something else. And of course, nowadays we have a lot of Americans converting into the church and things are changing
Right.
around and stuff. But there's still that kind of sense of like, this is how we believe and they're all doing it some other way. And we don't know anything about that. And it's something weird. And then you get there and you see it and you're like, wait a minute, it's not really all that foreign or weird at all. And it, I don't know. I think especially for kids, it's a lot to process. And even with my own kids, I didn't think that I had taught them anything super simplistic. And then now as they get older, they'll be like, well, Mom, you said it was this and this and this. And I'm like, wow, was I so black and white? Like,
oh my
whoops,
gosh, I know.
But
They
it
hold
can
us
be kind of
accountable.
confusing. They do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you went through that period and then you kind of snapped out of it. And then you had the high school years ahead. What were you like in high school? What were those years like?
They were challenging, but I was happy. It kind of, because it was an all girls high school, I was able to overcome some of my shyness and be able to speak out. So, I've always thought that if you're a woman and you want to advance in your studies, it's really not a bad idea to do some of your education as an all women's, type of school, because you kind of you get this bravery, that you start you're a little bit more able to be outspoken. So yeah, it's the whole thing, like, where are the boys? There aren't any boys in my school, but at least I was able to concentrate on my studies. And when I went to college, I had my voice. I wasn't afraid to speak up in class and to ask questions and things like that. But I had a core of good friends. I got along with everybody, and they were very different than me, and I was kind of good natured about things. So my high school, even though I said I grew up in a very white, neighborhood and everything, my actual high school, there were a lot of high schools that were Catholic, which unfortunately have closed in the Chicago area. And you would, how we talked about what parish did you belong to? Well, what high school did you go to? And you would look at their uniform skirts and say, oh, she's from Madonna and she's from, Good Counsel. And, it was kind of like this friendly rivalry. So now I'm talking so much, I forgot what I was going to say, but, but it was, it was good.
But you enjoyed high school. You liked it.
Did.
You had a great time.
I did. And I still stay in touch with a couple of my friends from there. So they were good. They were good people.
Thank God. Thank God. Well, what did you think you were going to do? Like, if we took a snapshot of you in high school, what did you think your life was going to look like?
I went in thinking I was going to be a lawyer, and I came out thinking, I think I want to be a doctor. So I wasn't, like, from a young age thinking I was going to be a physician. I wasn't particularly crazy about science, and I think it's because my 8th grade science teacher in public grade school must have been having a midlife crisis or something, but he was, like, very bitter. All he would talk about is how unhappy he was, and then he'd get mad at us for not getting the lesson right. So I'm like, well, I don't want to do science, and then you get to high school and you're like, wait, it's the state law. You have to take biology. And I'm like, I don't want to take biology. Biology is not going to be something I need in my life. And and I actually asked, like, the assistant principal, and she says, Voula, it's the law. You have to take biology. So So I took biology, and I ended up loving it. And so, of course, if you love biology, you go on to chemistry, and then you take your physics class. So somewhere along that line, I kind of said to myself, and forgive me, I don't want to offend anybody who's an attorney out there. My middle daughter's a lawyer, but I kind of thought like, well, if I become an attorney, I help one person, but I might harm the other person. I think I'd rather go into medicine where I can possibly help that person and not hurt anybody else. And
Oh,
so,
that's lovely. What
yep.
a neat way to look at something. That's really beautiful. I love
Yes.
that. Now we're talking about it like there are two options on the table. There's lawyers and there's doctors. Were you raised with it? I know in a lot of immigrant families, it's really like, okay, here we are, get the best possible education and pick one, lawyer or doctor. Is that how your family was?
No, and my parents definitely they pushed education, but they didn't tell me what to become. This is what they said,
Okay.
and oh my God, was it a kind of like an prophecy about how my life would turn out? They said to me, Voula, yeah, I was like 5 years old. They're telling me you have to go to college. I was like, college? I'm going to kindergarten right now. Okay, that's what you say. But it was hysterical. But I remember my parents saying, you don't know what can happen to a woman if something happens to her husband. If he dies, if he gets sick and paralyzed, if he leaves you for somebody else or something like that. I remember them saying that. So she goes, so they would say, you have to get an education because how are you going to support your family if something bad happens? And I was just, and then later in my life, I felt like, oh my God, how did they know that this was going to happen? So, yeah, so that was it. But they didn't tell me what. As a matter of fact, they knew I kept telling people, yeah, I think I'm going to become a lawyer. And then one day I said to them, I think I want to be a doctor. And they looked at me in shock and said, that's a lot of years. And I said, this is what I really want to do. And they just didn't say anything. But I'll tell you, there were times I felt like giving up, and they were like, my dad, I remember one time in med school, I felt like I was going to flop the exams. And he said to me in English with his Greek accent, he goes, if somebody throw you in the water, what are you going to do? And I'm looking at him, and he goes, and he starts motioning, with a swimming motion. He goes, you're in a situation, you start using your arms, you start using your legs, you stay alive. And he's a pretty funny, good-natured guy, and that's what I did. And every time I had like some kind of crisis, I would remember him telling me, somebody throws you in the water, you kick and you move your arms so you can stay afloat. So,
that's lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And I bet that came in handy later over the years.
Oh.
Medical school is hard, but there are a lot of hard things in life. And after the break, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about, twists and turns that life takes and how hard it gets.
Yeah.
But especially as a divorced mom, right? Like going through divorce, raising your kids, all of that stuff. It really is, what are you going to do? You've been thrown in the water. You're going to have to swim. Out of curiosity, though, when they were saying like, you're going to need an education just in case for some reason your husband fails you or he dies or something happens, did they know anyone that was happening to? Like, why?
Yes.
Were they, they, oh, okay. Okay. So they were seeing that around them and they were like, Voula, be ready.
Exactly. Actually, it had happened to several women, women that were left by their husbands, another one whose husband had a stroke and was partially paralyzed. And they had been stay-at-home moms. And now all of a sudden, and this is the days before, people had, welfare things and stuff like that. And it was very difficult for those families, and they wanted to make sure that would not happen to their daughters. So, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, excellent. All right. Well, so we are going to take a very short break, and then we're going to come back and we'll get going into all of the adult life and all of the other stuff that's gone on in your life. But we'll be right back. And keep in mind, please, listeners, you're welcome to call in at 1-855-AF-RADIO, and we'll be right back after this break.
Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich-Davis will be back in a moment. Give Elisa and her guest a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
For all of us, male or female, parent or not. That's what it's often like, isn't it? It's at the end of our own tether that the miracle happens. It is in our greatest weakness that God's strength is known. It's when we decrease that He can increase. It's in losing our life that we find it. To put it another way, it's in the spot where Saint Morwenna falls down, exhausted, that her spring rises up. It's when the people of God curse Moses in the wilderness and wish themselves back in Egypt that they hear the crack of the staff, the gush of water through the rock. It's when God Himself is spat upon and mocked and bleeding and dead that the glorious resurrection is ushered in.
From 7 Holy Women, Conversations with Saints and Friends, now available as an audiobook at Audible, Amazon, and iTunes.
We're back with Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich Davis. Do you have a question for Elisa and today's guest? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Elisa.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. Tonight we're talking with Voula Asimacopoulos. And I should say also you're welcome to call in at 1-855-AF-RADIO anytime you like. But we're having a great conversation, whether you do or don't, frankly. But so Voula, okay, so we've gotten through high school. And here you were, you thought you would become a lawyer, and then you really fell in love with being a doctor. During those years then, is that when you met and got married, or did you get married long after you became a doctor, or how did everything play out, and where did you go? Were you still in Chicago?
Yes, how many people do you know will actually go through all their education and still live in the same city? So I went through college in Chicago because, girls didn't go to other places to live during college. And I actually got into a medical school in Chicago and even did my residency in the Chicago area. So it was Chicago all the way. You grow up, your education takes a lot of time. I tried to go out with my sister and my friends as much as I could, just really didn't meet a whole lot and didn't really date a lot. And then one day, one of the residents I was training with said, well, I know somebody and I know his mother, and they're looking for, he's looking for the great bride hunt, so he'd like to meet you. And I was just like, I'm not really ready right now, because I had kind of gone through a little bit of a heartbreak earlier. And I kind of felt like, I'm just going to focus on my studies, and I just need to recover. But, he called up and we met, and everything went really well. I mean, he was involved in his church. He used to sing in the choir. He was also in a associated medical type field. Came from a good family, let's say. And it just kind of was a whirlwind, relationship. By then you're in your late 20s, and you kind of both think you have your head on straight and your acts together. So, I was still doing my residency when we got married, and I could tell you the first 12 years, were fairly happy. I mean, we always struggled financially. He had his own practice, never really went well. I, was in a overserved area and in the lowest ranking pay scale for physicians. But, I always kind of felt like, well, as long as you have, your family around you and love and health and hope, somehow we're going to get through all these things. We had 3 daughters. They're amazing. The youngest is a little bit younger than the other 2. She's 7 and 10 years younger than her big sisters. They're funny kids. They're bright kids. And so, it was pretty good. When I was pregnant with my last one, there was a very sudden change in his everything, behavior, appearance, attitude. He went from being a very, loving spouse who, always, gave you a little kiss when he was leaving or going, to not wanting to have any contact with you at all. He became very angry. He would start berating me in public. He would started expressing anger. He was getting rough with the kids, and it wasn't getting any better. I try to be a very good Christian wife, Elisa. I know you're not supposed to yell at spouses, so I didn't yell at him, but I would talk to him. I'd say, something's happening. You're not who you are. I think you might be depressed. Do you want to go see a psychologist? Do you want to see a psychiatrist? No, there's nothing wrong with me. No. Do you want me to put you on an antidepressant? I think there's something terribly wrong. No. And things just got bleaker and bleaker and bleaker. And, one day I'm saying my prayers, and I have like some really weird things that happen to me, almost, I don't want to say paranormal, but, I'm saying my prayers, and all of a sudden there's this image that gets thrust into my brain. And I'm in a rowboat. I know it sounds kind of hokey, but I'm in a rowboat, and I'm got my 3 girls hanging onto my back, and he's drowning in the water. It's a murky, water. And I bend down to pull him out of the water. And then all of a sudden, as looks like he's drowning, he turns his head up and looks at me with such hatred and takes a swipe at me. And immediately the vision just kind of disappeared. And I felt like to myself, oh my God, I was saying my prayers. I wasn't daydreaming. I wasn't doing anything. And I kind of felt like, what, there's something terribly wrong. And I had already, started thinking, I need to get the girls out of here and us out of here. He's sucking the life out of us. This is, it wasn't, again, I was talking to him. I was confronting him. I wasn't screaming or anything. I probably should have been. But unfortunately, what he ended up having wasn't anything that I could have solved.
Yeah.
So one day,
and when you're no, go on. But I do want to say, when you're asking someone, let's help, like, let's do something wrong. When you're dealing with a grown adult and they're not cooperating with that, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, they're just, and and you feel like as a spouse, you're supposed to do something, but there's not a whole lot to do. Even if you yourself are a physician, you need that cooperation from them. So go on with the story.
Yeah. So it was like we were going through a super cold snap in Chicago. In fact, that they actually were closing down the schools, not because of snow, but because of cold one day. And I was getting ready to go make rounds at the hospital and then go to the office. And he had the day off, and he was going to run out and have his car serviced. And our heat was going out, so I knew that there would be a repairman. So I kind of stayed back, and he left. And all of a sudden, a few minutes later, I hear the doorbell ring. And I'm thinking it's the guy that's going to repair our furnace. And in comes a man screaming at me, holding up like a search warrant. And like, I don't know, 11 other people right behind. And they're yelling at me, and I'm saying, no, you have the wrong house. You want the neighbor next door, because, we kept getting his subpoenas by accident. He had some kind of problem. So I thought, like, they're I don't know what he did, but they're at the wrong house again. And they're like, no, this is the right house. Look at the address. And they push me into the chair in the front room. And the thing is that my then 4-year-old saw the whole thing happen. She's like hanging on to my dress, and she's just in shock. She can't even say anything. And my 2 other older girls were still sleeping upstairs because, no school. And their agents run upstairs and just rouse them out of the bed. And nobody tells us for hours what's going on. They take the girls finally out of the room because they hadn't even eaten, and they start having some concern. And I kept asking them what this was all about. And I said to them, is this about my husband? And he looked at me and he says, why do you say that? And I said, well, if somebody was trying to sue me, you're not going to come in with 12, agents. I was so naive, Lisa. I can't even tell you. So, so this is going on. And, finally, they take me aside and they started asking me questions, and they finally came out. I guess they were trying to find him to arrest him, that he had been trading and downloading and trading a lot of child pornography. And I heard that Elisa, here I feel it's kind of terrible to be telling you, not you, but people, my story, because I don't want to deflect from child pornography and the demonic, horrific thing it is. And what it does to a person. I mean, what it does to the victim and what it does to the person. But, so all of a sudden you're finding out that, I mean, I thought he was doing something crazy politically. All he would talk to me about is he was angry about how elections had gone or certain things that were happening political. This kind of caught me completely off guard. I mean, I guess people who knew him before in school later came forward and said, yeah, he used to bring porn magazines to class. And I didn't know that that's the thing with people who are hiding an addiction, they become expert liars. And I was pretty gullible. I had kind of a quiet life. I hadn't done a lot of things, it was kind of study and hang out with family and friends and pretty naive about things. So anyway, I mean, my whole world is collapsing. I don't even know what to do. They won't let me call any family members. They did let me call my priest, which was really important. So Father Dean Batsis and later Presbytera Georgia were allowed to come and kind of give me support. And the ICE agents started feeling sorry for me because, they're just like hours had gone by. I wouldn't put anything in my mouth to eat or to drink. And they were just seeing me like ready to collapse because I felt like I had been living a lie. I had been an unhappy life the last 4 or 5 years, but it was like, this is not what I expected at any moment. I knew it was something sinister. This was not what I was expecting. Right. So, that night, a DCFS agent comes to the house and she asked me, well, if your husband gets released on bail, are you going to have him stay here? And I looked at her in disbelief and I said, absolutely not. He can stay with his parents. And she says, good, because I was ready to take the kids away. She said you were going to let him back. I didn't even know I was getting set up, and I could have lost my children then at that moment. So it was awful. And all I kept thinking is, I mean, shame now. You've had your problems for years. Your spouse, your father, I mean, and for my children's case, has been victimizing you by, being cruel and everything. And now you're like, okay, I can't even show my face to the world. And I'm thinking, I won't even be able to go to church. How? I can't even, because I go every Sunday. To me, I need it. I feel happy when I'm at church. I was like that ever since I was a little kid. Oh, are we going to go to church again? I kind of, that's how I was. And I'm thinking now, they're going to boo me out. They're not going to even let my children, and my children are going to leave the faith. And that's all I kept thinking, like, and anywhere I go, because the way Chicago is and how Greeks talk amongst themselves, they'll know who I am. If I go to a new church, they're going to, like, rouse me out. That's where my mind was going, okay? Would that have happened? I don't know. But that's what my mind was thinking. I was just like, you're feeling the guilt, the shame. You're horrified for victims. Horrified. I mean, to this day, I feel like I have to do something for this. But at the same time, you're innocent, and now you're getting punished, and punishment started from society. So the next morning,
and you're taking all of that on yourself, Voula. I mean, that wasn't you.
Yeah.
That wasn't you who did that.
No.
I mean, and I hope to the rest of the world that was always clear that was. That you're victimized by the same person who's perpetrating all of this other stuff.
It wasn't, Elisa. I mean, I was judged. First, I want to tell you, the response from church was actually 95%, if you put a percentage positive. People rang the doorbell. I'm pretty sure Father Dean and Presbytera Georgia got the troops rallied, and that gave us like enough hope to be able to go to church the following Sunday. But people rang the doorbell every day. They came in, they brought food, they sat with us. One of them was a child psychologist for Chicago. She immediately called the social workers for the schools the girls went to, so that when they walked in on Monday, they were there for them to help them go through this, because it was public. It was on the news. It was in the paper. As a matter of fact, our local paper, that's all the reporter kept talking about. And I actually called the agent in charge of our case, because he had said, if you need any help, call me. And I said, it's been like 6 weeks straight, and she writes about it every week. He says, yeah, I've never seen anything like that. I can't help you. So you're ashamed, to pull out of your driveway. You're ashamed. And people, even a few people, not many, thank God, but even a few people at church judge me. Oh, what do you mean she didn't know that was going on? It's amazing. When people say things to other people, somehow it gets back to the person they were talking about. I was just like finding out this person said this, that person said that. And then you have to go face them like a good Christian and just kind of block it out of your mind that, oh, yeah, you were kind of stabbing me in the back with some other people I know, so it's, but
you know what else? It's also like, why do we think that we're doing a good thing by telling our friends that, right? Like, how is it a good idea for me to call you and go, hey, by the way, Konstantinos over there, he really made a rude comment and I defended you. And it's like, well, it's real nice that you defended me. But if I didn't know he ever said that, my life would actually be better. But, it's so well intentioned, right? But it's like, don't tell me if someone's saying unreasonable things. Just correct them and leave me out of it, But, oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah. It was, I'm telling you, I mean, one said to me, the mom said you would never show your face again. And I looked at her, I go, I've been going to this parish. I mean, Father Dean had been my priest ever since I went to Ionian Village. That's where I first met him. And I'm like at that point, it was like over 30 years. And I said, if I go to any other church, don't you think they're going to find out about who we are? I go, I'm just going to stay here. And eventually, most people will get tired about talking about us. And that's what I did. But I couldn't have done it if, my parish, my friends in the parish hadn't rallied around. Elisa, I can't tell you. I mean, I had, to this day, for years, friends that took my kids on college tours. They moved them in. They took them out for ice cream. We were so broke because divorce is very expensive, and plus we were not doing well financially. And then I was stuck with his debts. I don't even know how we survived. We were like, I can't even tell you how little we had in the bank. I mean, I couldn't even take my kids to the museum. It was kind of like, hey, let's put our peanut butter sandwiches and go to the local forest preserve and have a picnic there, or let's go to the Korean market and look at how interesting their food looks. I mean, it was
so great,
really
though.
lame.
It's not lame. It's you being a great mom, right? Like you could have just said,
Lisa.
everybody sit in the house. We're going to be miserable and this is all, but you didn't, right? You said, you're right. We need a field trip. Where are we going? Where are we going? Let's go to all the free places in Chicago and we're going to walk around and we're going to see, and they're going to have great memories of those things. They're not going to, and it's not going to occur to them until someday when they're talking about it as adults and you say, well, yeah, we did those things because we were broke. Those were free things. And they're going to be like, oh, what I mean? Like they don't even, as kids, they don't realize that at all. Right. Like as kids, they're just like, my mom really likes this kind of stuff. And mostly it just doesn't cost any money. But that's a coincidence.
She's always looking. And you know what? They've learned to be super duper bargain shoppers. I have to tell you that's kind of instilled in them. So yeah, they're careful with their money. That's a good lesson that they got, But
That's right.
and that's like the other thing though, as a parent. I mean, I'm talking about what I went through, but my kids, I mean, it's their father, right? Their identity changed. Who they saw was their father and their protector, and the grief that they went through. I mean, every night crying themselves to sleep. Whose bed do I sit on and hold their hand while they cry? What do I tell them? I mean, when you have one daughter telling people, why my dad? Why was it my dad that did that? I mean, you'd feel shame to feel, I mean, it's something they've all had to struggle with. They've had their issues at times with anxiety and depression and they've, felt betrayed. I mean, this is the guy that's supposed to protect you, not, the one. And thank God he never touched them. That was, thank the God and the Theotokos a trillion times. But you wonder, like, it probably would have been a matter of time. And anyway, I'm just going rambling.
Thank God.
But it's just,
no, it's true. So it's true that it could have been worse, and thank God. But it is so hard for them, and over the years, right? It's gonna. They have to reprocess that. For when children experience grief, they have to reprocess it every time they hit that next developmental stage, and even as I know, speaking for myself as an adult, I found out that my dad had done some pretty awful things, and I've gone through a lot of that process myself. And it's a lot. It's a lot to carry. That's the legacy they've been handed, and that's not your fault, but that's what they'll have to deal with. And it's hard, but it's also, you know, like you said, it could have been worse. Thank God. But you're raising them well, right? And you're praying for them,
I'm
and you've got them in
trying.
the church, and you're doing beautiful. So when we talk about the church, then, so there were some people gossiping in annoying ways, but a lot of people supporting you, and your priest was really supportive. So overall, did you find that your faith was a big part of what kind of kept you swimming through this and kept you going?
I did. I absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I felt like people were telling me things that were wrong. Like somebody said to me, well, there's a reason God did this to you. And I looked at her and I said, God didn't do this to me. My husband did this to me. God only helped me. Elisa, because of my faith, because when you pray and you get used to praying, I really think God gives you certain things. And little by little, I started realizing things that I wanted to be done differently that happened not the way I wanted, actually, in the end, were all to protect me. My sister and my parents lived like, blocks away, so my dad could like drive us around. My priest had known me since I was 18 years old. And my presbytera, I love my presbytera, so much too. And I have to tell you, every priest we had in our parish, our second priest, our Father Telemachos, our co-priest, in some way, always somehow helped us, whether it was through a sermon or some kind of kind deed. But yeah, it was really strengthened. And I think the person who helped me a lot too was this Athonite monk that used to come to our parish, priest monk, Father Philippas. And just a couple of weeks after our whole horrible thing had happened, he had come back to visit our parish. He'd usually come around the feast day. And he said, I was waiting. Of course, I'm ashamed, but I'm waiting in the walkway as people are coming out of church, just wanting him to talk to me. And he sees me and he says, Voula, talk to so-and-so. I'm going to come to your house. I'm like, I didn't even ask him, right? And then he comes to my house a few days later, and I start saying, Father Philippa, this is what my husband did. He goes, I don't need to hear what your husband did. We don't know why people do what they do, he said. We even on Mount Athos, we've been involved in scandals, and that's a good thing because that has humbled us. We are not better than lay people, and it has reminded us of our weaknesses. But all God wants you to do is raise your daughters. And whenever the thought of your husband goes to in your mind, he didn't say you have to forgive him. He said, just say, may the Lord forgive him. And then he started saying things. He didn't know me that well, but things I had wanted to do in my life. And then you'll be able to go on your mission trip. Well, how did he know I was supposed to go on a mission trip before I met my husband? And then you're going to go to the Holy Lands. And he tells my daughter, after you finish your studies, he told my oldest daughter, you have to come and stay in the house, back with your mom for a year before you get married. Oh my God, that's exactly what happened. She finished her studies, moved back home, lived here a year, and then went and got married. But the simplicity of the faith, simplicity and the hope, and even the people from our church. I have to tell you, the women from the pews, these little yayas that just stay in the pews, and you kind of like wave to them, you recognize them. Little by little started coming forth and sharing my story. And let me tell their stories. And let me tell you, we have saints sitting amongst us that we don't know. And which is a wonderful reason why you do this program, because I've learned so much from your guests. But the people who had been in brutal first marriages, and one told me you have to eventually forgive your husband. Another one had a harsh husband who died, and she had to raise her kids alone. And she's 90-something years old, and all she does is pray to God every day. Please, Lord, help me learn how to love all people. Elisa, I cannot even tell you the spiritual giants. And very quietly, one way, and it's not just a divorced woman. It's like you said, the widows. I have one of my patients. Her husband died 10 years ago unexpectedly, and she's like, she goes, I was with all these people. I would have them to my house at least 3 times a year. They were there when my husband died. They were there when the memorial was. Where are they now? There's a lot of loneliness. And you think like, oh, she's 70 something or 80 something years old. She's got her act together. They live with loneliness in their hearts every single day. And it's not even just, like I said, the divorce. It's a man. It could be a man that's divorced or widowed. My dad's lonely. I mean, we try to do as much as we can with him, but it's my dad. It's like I said, we forget about the widows. After I have a friend who's widowed, works 3 jobs, and she used to be so involved in the church, and she says, I don't even feel like I belong anymore. And nobody really reaches out to her except for one friend. Well, where have I been for her? I'm kind of like calling people out, but I'm calling myself out because I really need to be there for these other women, because we are all going through it together, Elisa. I mean, some people will always, no matter what happens to you, you'll be Elisa, I'll be Voula. They'll always be in our lives. But let's face it, once, you get divorced or widowed, you lose your, not only social status out in public, you lose your social status in church. And then, you're not really included all the time and everything. I mean, I can't see our priests. I mean, I've been teaching Sunday school. I'm, on the InReach committee. The Philoptochos ladies that I finally joined Philoptochos a couple of years ago. They've been wonderful. It's not like the church doesn't want me, but there's just kind of like this social. You have to have a nuclear family, even though that's a artificially constructed thing. Otherwise, you're a loser. You took a vow, not a vow. You were in a sacrament, and your marriage fell apart. So you're kind of one of those broken people, and we don't really, that's how I feel. Maybe it's not that way, but I sure feel that way a lot of times. So.
Well, and I think we have to be so careful about, because you're right, there's a lot of loneliness out there and people don't realize it, right? So it's like they're having a bunch of couples get together and they're thinking, what are the 6 couples I want to invite? And they're not thinking people, they're thinking couples, or it's, and I think a lot of times, if you were to ask them, is there anything wrong with Voula? They'd say, no, of course not. And it would just be, I just didn't think of it, but you're right. You're absolutely right. But it's also, but like you say, right, we can feel left out. I think too that the enemy, that's what he does to us, right? He says, you're left out. They don't want you. They don't want you. He's trying to isolate us, right? But they do want us. And what we're really supposed to do is get up and say, okay, well, that means that I need to gather together 9 women and say, we're all getting together for dinner. We're all getting together for lunch next Saturday or whatever it is. But it's hard to do, but it's worth it, right? It's so important. It's so important. Voula, I love hearing your story and hearing your resilience. I know you've been through so many difficult things, but we talk about all of this shame it's so interesting because it's not really your shame, but somehow you end up carrying it too. And that just tells you something about how insidious these kinds of things are, right? That, as you said, they're all different sorts of victims. And when you talk about something like pornography, right, you have the victims who are in the photos, but then you have the victims whose minds are taken over by seeing these things, right? And getting involved in it. And it's awful.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And that if there's anything I could say, really quickly, is that if you know anybody who's even involved in mild porn, please make them stop. Kids are starting in middle school. What the ICE agent said is they start with like soft porn on some kind of HBO show, and then it just keeps progressing. And then finally it reaches the child pornography. And then after that, they can start acting out on it. And look at it. So anybody, don't fool yourself. This will suck you in. You will lose your personhood. You will lose everything, your family, but you will lose who you are. You will lose your soul. So anybody who's doing this, who's hearing this, please don't do it. Stop right now. So.
Amen. Absolutely. There are so many things that may not seem like a big deal. They build up. The enemy uses them to tear us apart. But Voula, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you, Elisa.
I love this. I love getting a chance to talk to you one of these days. Maybe I'll be in Chicago.
Amen.
We can go out and talk some more. I would love that. But
we'd love to have you talking back at St. Haralambos. So
that's right. I love
part
St.
of our family.
So that's right. I got to come out before, and I had such a good time there, and it was such lovely people. And so thank you, Voula, and thank you to our audience. Thanks for joining us tonight. And we hope to see you again. Come on back next week to Everyday Orthodox, and we'll meet another Everyday Orthodox Christian. Good night. And up next, we have Father Evan Armitage. Father Evan, are you ready to go?
Alyssa, I have to tell you, 9 months ago, I told you I was going to